How successful were labor unions in achieving their goals in the 1800s? In the warm-up, you learn about the conditions workers faced. To demand better working conditions, workers created labor unions and went on strike. In this lesson, you're going to learn about the labor movement's goals, how corporations responded to those goals, and how an event, the Pullman strike, is a great case study for the problems that happened during this era. In this segment, you'll learn about the goals of the early labor movement in America and how workers tried to achieve those goals.
The labor movement was all about getting workers together to band together and fight for change. Labor organizations have been around for a long time. Craft guilds were an early kind of organized labor. Guild members are masters, trained apprentices in skilled labor. Guilds maintained quality control by limiting membership to the best workers and set prices for their members' work. Trade unions were skilled workers who organized to protest the lowering of wages and the increased use of unskilled workers. Unskilled workers faced a tough situation. Skilled workers had trade unions. To get similar benefits, unskilled workers formed labor unions, organizations that presented workers' demands and negotiated with owners. Unions represented different groups of workers, but they all shared the same concern. One common demand was the shortening of the workday from 12 to 10 hours. Eventually, unions would demand an 8-hour day. Another common demand was for better pay. Even the least skilled worker had mouths to feed. Another common demand was for safer workplaces and compensation for workers injured on the job. In order to achieve these demands, workers engaged in collective bargaining, which is negotiating with management by union leaders on behalf of a group of workers who would receive the benefits.
Strike is a strategic work stoppage designed to put pressure on an employer to give in to a union's demands. One of the first strikes in the country was by the Lowell Mill Girls, who you can see right here in this picture. They're in Massachusetts, and they were protesting wage cuts in their mill. Now, by them doing this, they paved the way for future strikes in other industries. They began to become organized to protest unfair labor practices, and a group that did this was the American Federation of Labor. It was an early labor union that became one of the most powerful unions by the end of the 1800s. The AFL grew out of a group of craft unions bringing together skilled workers from many different industries. They were led by Samuel Gompers. They focused on core demands such as shorter work hours, safer work conditions, and the rights of workers to organize, form, and join unions. The thing is that the AFL was only admitting skilled workers only. These workers were much harder to replace than unskilled ones, so unions were in much better position to gain concessions from business owners as a result. Now, because the AFL was better organized than most other unions, which were often unable to build a consensus between skilled and unskilled members and workers from different industries, the AFL leadership avoided partisan politics and kept the focus on so-called bread and butter issues. These were aimed at improving the everyday lives of working people. And one of the early leaders of this was Samuel Gompers. He was an English-born cigar maker who transformed the organized labor movement in the United States. Gompers was president of the AFL from 1886 until his death in 1924. He was the longest-serving president of the union. Under his leadership, the AFL became the world's largest and most influential labor union in America and the world. So they had nearly 3 million members by the time of Gompers' death in 1924. social reform by improving the economic conditions and maintaining political independence. You know that the workers of the Industrial Revolution often faced difficult and dangerous working conditions. To improve these working conditions, workers formed unions such as the AFL, went on strike to force businesses and owners to shorten the workday and make the workplace safer. In this segment, you'll learn how management and governments responded to labor's demands, and this will help us answer the question, how successful were labor unions in achieving their goals in the 1800s?
For employers, the growth of unions meant growing costs. Managers believed that having shorter workdays would reduce productivity, which meant they would have to hire more workers to produce the same amount of goods. This would cause production costs to go up and profits to go down. Companies were eager to stop unions and resisted some of their goals. Companies weren't happy with striking workers. Most employers believed that union organization would cost their company money. Therefore, they thought it was wise to keep unions out of the company altogether through a process called union busting. Companies fired workers they tried to join a union, blacklisted union organizers. Those are people they put on a list. If they find out they weren't a union organizer, they wouldn't get hired anywhere, and banned union organizers from company property. Before hiring workers, companies forced new employees to sign contracts promising not to join unions. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency was a private security company founded in 1850. Companies hired Pinkertons to spy and infiltrate unions. The detectives would pose as union members and infiltrate labor organizations, either to bust the union before it could form or report if the union planned to go on strike. When a company's workers went on strike, the company can no longer produce goods or make money. Therefore, employers called on strike breakers to stay in business. Strike breakers were not members of the union and would cross the picket line. People who crossed the lines were often called scabs. Another way to control workers was through company towns. Towns are cities where most of all the buildings, utilities, and services and stores were owned by the same company that employed the majority of the workers who lived there. Companies weren't the only ones who got involved in breaking up unions and strikes. The government was also called in to break up unions. In some instances, strikes would turn violent and strikers as well as strike breakers would get injured and sometimes even killed. When this happened, the government would often intervene and break up the strikes. The government, more often than not, sided with company management and would jail workers who were involved in strikes if those workers were found to be breaking the law.
You know that labor unions use strikes to win demands from employers. That's their goals. We also know that employers, often with government support, retaliate with lockouts and union busting strategies, such as hiring scabs and Pinkertons and using threats, bribery, and violence against unions. Now let's take a look at despite management's efforts to bust unions, workers still organized and went on strike. Now you learn about a strike tactics were used, and this is the Pullman strike. And this will help answer our question, how successful were labor unions in achieving their goals in the 1800s?
Pullman, Illinois was a model company town built by the Pullman Company, which built sleeping cars for the railroads. The company owned the land, every home, and every business. The town was clean and safe, but its residents had to live by company law, including an unpopular ban on alcohol. When a recession hit in the 1890s, the company began to lay off workers and cut wages, but refused to lower the high rents and food prices. It also stopped workers from moving away to more affordable towns because they could fire anyone who did so. Some workers at Pullman went on strike. Unlike other strikes you've learned about, the Pullman strike was a wildcat strike. That means it did not have the authorization of the Pullman Workers Union. The Pullman strike is probably the most famous wildcat strike in American history. When the workers sent a delegation to company owner George Pullman to protest wage cut and high rents, he fired 3 of the workers. In response, some of the Pullman workers decided to go on strike. Some of the workers were members of the American Railway Union, led by Eugene V. Debs. While the strike began as a wildcat strike, it soon earned the support of the union, who issued a nationwide boycott of Pullman Railroad cars. A boycott is a voluntary refusal to use or buy something, usually in the form of a protest. The strike soon turned violent, completely disrupting travel and shipping in the West. The railroad companies called on the federal government for help. The Attorney General ordered unions could not disrupt railroad traffic. The president, Grover Cleveland, sent in federal troops to end the strike. A charismatic union leader would emerge from the Pullman strike, a man named Eugene Debs. Eugene V. Debs began his career as a labor organizer. His first major union was a local lodge of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Firemen in Indiana in 1875. He earned national recognition for his role in organizing the Pullman Railroad strike in 1894. He was sentenced to jail in its aftermath, but went on to a long career as a powerful figure in organized labor. Neither side won a complete victory after the Pullman strike. As a result of the Pullman strike, union organizers were charged with criminal acts, including American Railway Union leader Eugene Debs, who was sentenced to 6 months in prison. Pullman rehired workers, but only if they resigned from the union. Most of them did. Pullman lost more money fighting the strike than it would have if it had agreed to the workers' original demands. Wary of Pullman's example, companies increasingly appealed to the courts to issue orders against unions in their activities. They were generally successful in stopping union activity because the federal government refused to recognize legal protections for unions.